That day started off unremarkably. I'd been stuck at the university for weeks, buried in a project I had barely started to care about. Then, around noon, my department head emailed me the funding for our research initiative was delayed. I had the rest of the day free, rare for me, and my first thought was to see Melanie. She'd been working from her art studio downtown for months. Normally, I text before heading over, a habit we picked up early in our relationship, a kind of respectful distance we both maintained. But that afternoon, something made me skip the usual message. It wasn't suspicion, at least not then. It was more instinct. Maybe a desire to feel spontaneous again. The drive downtown was smooth, the kind of late fall afternoon where the light cuts at an angle and everything looks more honest than it really is. I found a meter outside her building and climbed the stairs 2 at a time, telling myself I'd surprise her, maybe grab coffee together. Normal couple stuff. We hadn't done that in a while. Her building was one of those repurposed loft spaces, exposed brick, industrial lights, squeaky wood floors. I let myself in through the studio's front glass door, expecting the usual smell of paint and the low hum of her playlist echoing off the concrete. But it was quiet. Almost too quiet. I called out softly, "Mel?" No answer. I took a few steps further in and glanced around the open area, easels, half-finished canvases, her usual mess of brushes and reference photos. Then I caught movement behind the frosted glass wall of the small meeting room off to the side. A flicker of motion, then laughter, hers. Curious, I walked slowly toward the window. The frost didn't hide much from this angle. Inside, Melanie was seated across from a man in a tailored navy jacket. Their knees were touching, not just close, but actually pressing like neither of them noticed or cared. Her hand rested in the narrow space between their chairs, palm down on the table's edge, close enough that he could have reached over without effort. He leaned in and said something to her. She laughed. Her head tilted in that familiar way, the one she used when she was fully relaxed, charmed. And then she placed her hand on her lap, brushing close to his. I froze. My body wasn't sure what to do, go in, walk away, knock? It wasn't anything explicit, not technically, but it didn't look like business. I knew how she acted during meetings. Confident, professional, sometimes curt. This was something else. I knocked on the glass. Firm, just loud enough. They both jerked away like I'd poured cold water on them. Melanie blinked at me, then quickly stood and smoothed the front of her blouse. Her mouth shaped into a smile, practiced and tight. "Logan," she said, stepping out of the room like nothing was wrong. "I didn't know you were coming by today." I glanced past her shoulder. The man avoided my eyes, gathering a sleek black leather folder and rising stiffly. Melanie turned to him. "Thanks for your time, I'll follow up via email." He nodded without speaking, then brushed past me on his way out. Didn't shake my hand, didn't introduce himself. Just gone. When I turned back to her, she was already moving toward the small kitchenette, fiddling with the espresso machine like I'd just dropped by to say hi. "That was an investor," she said over her shoulder. "He's eccentric. Kind of intense. You know, the type that thinks business meetings should feel like therapy sessions." I leaned against the counter, trying not to let my voice harden. His communication style seemed cozy. She smiled at that, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Don't be dramatic," she said lightly. It was strictly professional. He's funding the next phase of the studio expansion. I couldn't exactly tell him not to sit close. "Anyway, why didn't you text first?" I shrugged. "Thought I'd surprise you." "Well," she said, turning to hand me a coffee, "you certainly did." Her tone was even. Her face was calm. But something in the air had shifted, something I couldn't quite define. I watched her for a moment longer than necessary, looking for a crack, a flinch, some flicker of guilt. Nothing. Just that same serene expression, slightly more polished than usual. We drank our coffee. I stayed for maybe half an hour, pretending not to replay the image in my mind, her laughing, the way her hand had hovered between them, the way they flinched when I knocked. She showed me a few sketches she was working on, talked about a new gallery opening in the spring. Her voice never wavered. But all the while, my chest felt tight. My thoughts splintered. That night, she came home with me like normal. Cooked stir-fry, poured us wine, told me a story about one of her junior artists getting a commission from New York. She laughed at my old joke about tofu being flavorless optimism in a pan. She kissed me goodnight, curled up beside me. Said nothing strange. But something in her had changed, and not in a way I could point to clearly. Not guilt exactly. Not remorse. It was more like caution. A quiet rewiring, like someone preparing to be found out but not yet ready to admit it. I lay awake long after she fell asleep beside me. My mind kept circling back to that meeting room. Her posture. The silence that followed. And most of all, the certainty deep in my gut that something important had just begged *N to crack. After that day at the studio, I tried to pretend nothing was wrong. I tried to tell myself it was just a weird interaction, a misunderstanding. People sit close. People laugh. Maybe the guy really was just an eccentric investor. But when you start noticing cracks, it's hard to stop seeing them everywhere. The signs weren't explosive. They weren't dramatic. They were small, quiet, and that's what made them harder to fight. It started with her schedule. Melanie had always worked long hours, especially in the lead-up to new exhibitions or client pitches. But lately, she was rarely home. Sometimes she'd leave before I was even out of bed, claiming an early staff meeting. Other nights, she wouldn't come back until after midnight, saying the studio was under pressure with a monthly deliverable. That phrase, monthly deliverable, started becoming her catch-all excuse, the kind that sounds real enough to nod at but vague enough to avoid questions. Then came the new phone. She already had one, a sleek, expensive smartphone I'd helped her pick out last Christmas. But one day, I noticed a second device on the counter. It was a simpler model, still shiny, barely used. "Oh, it's just for clients," she said with a wave of her hand. "Some of the gallery people want to text instead of email." I figured it was easier to separate work and personal. Sounded reasonable. Except she kept it on silent. Always. Even in the middle of the night, it was there screen down, right by her pillow, like it had a heartbeat of its own. When I brought it up once, she laughed and said, "It's just art people, Logan. They're awake at weird hours. You don't want to hear from them at 2 a.m., do you?" She wasn't wrong. But something about that phone unsettled me. Then there was the perfume. Melanie had worn the same scent for nearly 10 years. It was part of her. The first time we kissed, she smelled like soft vanilla and vetiver. Every anniversary, I bought her a new bottle. But around mid-November, that smell changed. It was sharper, louder, spicier, something floral layered with musk. When I noticed, I asked about it casually. She just smiled and said, "I felt like switching things up. You always tell me I'm too predictable." I did say that once. Jokingly. During our 3rd year of marriage. Apparently, she remembered. We went to dinner with friends the next week, a small group we usually saw every month. We were talking about summer plans, maybe a trip to Big Sur or Colorado, something with open skies and no cell service. I mentioned that Melanie and I had talked about doing a road trip through the Pacific Northwest, just the two of us. She cut in quickly. "We spend too much time together as it is," she said, laughing a little too sharply. "I think Logan would go nuts without a Wi-Fi signal for more than 2 hours." Our friends chuckled. I tried to smile, but something about the way she said it felt off. Dismissive. Like the idea of being with me uninterrupted was somehow suffocating. Another time, I saw a message pop up on her screen while she was in the kitchen. It flashed for half a second, a name I didn't recognize, a first name only, and a time, still on for 7:30. I pretended not to notice, but later that night, she said she had a gallery board meeting. Odd, since I knew the gallery didn't meet on Saturdays. I didn't say anything. I just nodded. And every time I kept quiet, something inside me coiled tighter. Her laptop, once always open on the kitchen counter, now traveled with her everywhere, to the bedroom, to the bathroom. I asked once if I could look up a recipe while she was chopping vegetables, and she said, "Use your phone, babe. I'm logged into something sensitive." Sensitive became her favorite word. Projects were sensitive. Meetings were sensitive. Her inbox was sensitive. I started to wonder if I was too. Even her food habits changed. Melanie was never a foodie. She liked what she liked and rarely splurged. But suddenly she was ordering delivery from upscale restaurants, $50 pasta dishes, imported wine, fusion sushi with gold flakes on top. When I asked, she said she'd gotten a client food credit through the studio. Besides, she added, "You always tell me to treat myself more." I did. But not like this. Not in secret. The biggest red flag? The silence between us. We used to talk about everything. Random thoughts, stupid memes, half-baked dreams for a house with a view. But over the past month, conversations with her felt like walking into a room that used to be full of laughter and finding only dust. One night, I asked her how her day went. She gave a short, clipped answer about rescheduling a shipment of canvas. I asked how her assistant Megan was doing, and she just said, "Busy," then changed the subject. That silence grew louder than any fight we'd ever had. I started noticing how often she looked at me without really seeing me. Like she was watching a rerun she'd already memorized. Still, I didn't confront her. I wasn't ready. Part of me still believed there had to be a rational explanation. We'd hit rough patches before, when her father got sick, when I lost funding for my first teaching grant, when we went through a full month barely scraping rent. But we always made it through. We always came back. Maybe this was just stress. Maybe she was overwhelmed. Maybe the long nights and quiet detachment were just her coping with something she didn't want to burden me with. I told myself that, even as I watched her brush her hair with that distant look in her eyes, even as I heard her laugh at a message she never let me see. But deep down I knew. Not knew in the way that people know facts. Knew in the way that makes your stomach drop when the phone rings in the middle of the night. Knew in the way that your hands shake even when no one's watching. A few days after the dinner with friends, I opened my drawer and found a photo album I hadn't touched in years. One from our early days, road trips, art shows, afternoons painting our first apartment. I flipped through it and each image felt like a lie I was now complicit in. That's when I realized something important. I wasn't just hoping she'd explain it all away. I was scared she would. Because if her explanations were good enough, I might be tempted to believe them even if I knew better. And if I believed her, I'd be stuck living in a story I no longer trusted. So I waited. Quietly. Watching the gaps widen. Collecting the pieces. And preparing for the moment I'd finally let myself look straight at the truth. 3 days after the studio visit, the quiet between us had grown so loud I could barely think straight. I was existing in a fog, answering work emails, grading papers, attending meetings, but inside, I was circling. Waiting. Turning over everything I'd seen, everything she'd said. I kept hoping it would stop gnawing at me. It didn't. That morning, I opened my laptop just to check messages before class. I almost missed it. The email had no subject. The sender's address was a string of random letters. It looked like spam, the kind you delete without thinking. But something made me pause. Maybe it was the timing. Maybe it was the way my stomach nodded just seeing it. I clicked. There were 3 attachments, 2 photos and 1 video. No message. No signature. The first photo hit me like a punch. It showed Melanie, clear as day, walking into a hotel lobby in Dallas. She was holding hands with a man, the same man from the studio. His head was turned toward her, and she was smiling in that way I hadn't seen in months. Her body leaned into his. Her hand was in his. And it wasn't friendship. It wasn't business. It was an asterisk Macy. The second photo showed them again, this time outside a parking garage. They were standing beside a black SUV with out-of-state plates. He was pulling her close, her head resting against his shoulder. She looked peaceful. Like she belonged there. I opened the video last. It wasn't long, maybe 20 seconds. It was grainy, filmed from a distance, like a hidden camera. They were inside what looked like a small apartment, candles on the windowsill, a wine bottle half empty on the table. He said something I couldn't make out, but then her voice came through, clear as glass. Logan won't figure it out, she said with a low laugh. He's too kind. And I'm bored. That's all. That's all it took to break whatever was left of me. I played it again. Then again. Her voice had no regret. No hesitation. Just boredom. Contempt. Like I was a joke she'd outgrown. I didn't throw my laptop. I didn't scream. I just sat there, completely still, the room around me suddenly sharper in focus. The coffee on my desk. The faint hum of the heat vent. The sound of students outside my window. I called into work and told them I wouldn't be in. Then I went downstairs and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the same mug she had given me on our 5th anniversary, best partner ever, it read in hand-painted letters. I stared until I couldn't anymore. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a bad moment or a mistake she'd spiral about in therapy. It wasn't the kind of story you could retell with a soft ending. This wasn't weakness. It was cruelty. And deliberate. She'd planned this. Later that afternoon, she came home like nothing had changed. She kicked off her shoes, dropped her keys in the bowl, asked if I wanted to order Thai. I said I had papers to grade. She leaned in to kiss my cheek, and I didn't move. She pulled back a little. You okay? I looked at her for a beat too long. Tired, I said. Yeah, she murmured, already turning away. Same. She didn't see anything in my eyes. Or maybe she did and didn't care. I sat there watching her walk down the hall to the bathroom, wondering how many nights she'd kissed me with his hands still on her. Wondering how long she'd looked at me and seen a fool. That night, I didn't sleep. I drafted an email to a lawyer a colleague had recommended months ago after his own divorce. I included the video. I attached the photos. I asked for a consultation the next morning. When I got the reply, a short, formal confirmation of our appointment, I felt something shift inside me. The grief didn't leave. The anger didn't either. But something colder stepped in, clarity. The kind that doesn't shake. The kind that moves quietly with purpose. Melanie didn't come home the next night until nearly 1 in the morning. Said she was working late with a new investor who was very demanding. I nodded. She kissed my forehead. I watched her go. That weekend, I changed the passwords on all our shared accounts. Canceled the joint credit card. Took down the photos from our hallway, packed them in a box, and slid it into the back of the coat closet. I wasn't doing it to hurt her. I was doing it because I'd already started the process of living without her. On Sunday night, I opened a private document on my laptop. At the top, I wrote what I know. And then I started listing everything: the phone, the changed perfume, the unexplained nights, the photos, the video. Every lie she told. Every redirection. It wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. Evidence. In case she tried to twist the story later. In case she claimed confusion or accident. I wanted the truth in writing, not for her, but for myself. Because when someone betrays you slowly, quietly, over months, it's easy to start doubting your own memory. I wasn't going to let that happen. She didn't notice any of it. Or pretended not to. She went on with her schedule: late nights, client dinners, missed calls. She still laughed at the TV like nothing had shifted, still posted filtered photos of her workspace with captions like, "In the zone sparkles." Still kissed me before leaving, though her lips barely touched my skin. And I let her. Because I needed the rest of the picture. I needed to understand just how far she was willing to go. The morning after I filed the paperwork, I got a call from an unknown number. Normally, I'd ignore it, let it ring into the void, and return to whatever task I was using to stay numb. But something told me to answer. "Logan," the voice on the other end asked. "Male? Mid-30s, maybe?" "Speaking. My name's Eli. I work IT support at Melanie's studio." I stood up, heart tightening. "Okay. I don't mean to cross a line," he said quickly. "But I think you deserve to know what's really been going on." There was a pause. "I'm listening." "I've seen some things," he said. "I didn't go looking. But when you manage the server backend, you see patterns. File sharing, encrypted folder names, audio messages flagged for cloud backup. I've been sitting on this for a while. I didn't want to get involved. But after what I saw last week, I couldn't stay quiet." "What did you see?" He hesitated. "They've been renting a loft downtown. Under a false name. Charged to the studio's business card." I sat down slowly. "They?" "Melanie and a man named Daniel. He sometimes goes by Dan. He's not just some fling. I've traced messages and logs. It's been going on for over 6 months. Maybe longer. They started using company accounts to arrange meetings. Shared a burner Dropbox folder called Creative Assets. But it's just photos. Of them. Trips. Hotel rooms. One was a zip file from a weekend in Santa Fe. I couldn't speak. "I'm sending it all to your email," Eli said. "If you don't want it, delete it. But you should see." I whispered, "Thank you. Also, I think you should know Daniel's married. His wife, Amanda, works at Whitmore and Hunt. It's a firm Melanie's been pitching to for months. She applied for a transfer there last quarter." I stared blankly at the window. The skyline beyond looked blurry. "They knew what they were doing," Eli continued. "This wasn't an accident. It wasn't even careless. It was organized. Quiet. Planned." He hung up a minute later. I sat there, holding the phone like it might still be ringing. 10 minutes later, the email came through. An archive file, password protected. The password was a phrase Melanie used to say when she got excited about a new project: "fresh eyes." I typed it in. Inside the folder was everything. Screensh *TS. Messages. Call logs. Photos. Voice memos. The first photo was of Melanie and Daniel sitting on a rooftop at sunset. Wine glasses clinked mid-cheers. A handwritten note sat on the table: "To what we deserve." Another showed them lying side by side in bed, faces half covered by sheets, laughing. Her hair spilled across his chest like I used to know it. One message read, "M, he's still buying it. Sweet, predictable Logan." I almost feel bad. "D, don't. You're doing what you need to land on his feet." I clicked on a short voice recording. It started with ambient street noise, then Melanie's voice: "He doesn't ask questions. It's like he wants to pretend everything's fine. That's the part that's hardest, not the lying. The fact that it's so easy." There it was again. That contempt. That indifference. I didn't cry. I didn't even shake. I just felt hollow. When someone cheats, you brace yourself for pain. But when you discover they've created a second life, one where you're a background character in their story, that's something else. That's erasure. I spent the rest of the day cataloging what I had. I wasn't plotting revenge. I wasn't even sure what I was doing. I just needed to understand how deep it went. In one of the call logs, Melanie referred to Amanda, Daniel's wife, by name. "She's too busy billing hours to notice anything." Honestly, it's almost sad. It wasn't just betrayal. It was cruelty. Mockery. A theater of deception where everyone else was just collateral. The loft address Eli mentioned was listed in a message thread. Unit 4B. Rented under K. Morris. I drove by that afternoon. It was in a newer building, the kind with coated gates and exposed wood beams. Their second life had better amenities than the one she shared with me. I didn't try to go in. Just sat across the street in my car, watching. Eventually, a light came on in the unit. 2 shadows moved past the window. Laughter. Then the sound of jazz, faint but clear. I left before I did something stupid. Back home, I stared at my phone, thumb hovering over Amanda's LinkedIn profile. I'd found her through a shared contact, a professor who once taught both of us during Law Symposium Week. I hesitated. Would I want to know? Yes. So I messaged her. Hi Amanda. My name is Logan. I believe we should talk. I have information about Daniel and Melanie. I can prove it. She didn't reply that night. But the next morning I had a message waiting. Meet me at 6 p.m. Café Brio. No details. No photos. Just bring what you have. I printed everything. Brought a flash drive. And when I walked into that cafe, I saw her instantly, Amanda. Late 30s, poised, sharp eyes. She looked like someone who'd seen enough not to flinch easily. I introduced myself. Sat down. And without a word, handed her the folder. She flipped through the first few pages. Her face didn't change much. Just her jaw tightening slowly. Deliberately. When she looked up, she said, I knew. But now I know. I nodded. She added, he always said I was paranoid. Told me I was imagining things. They always do, I said quietly. Amanda looked out the window, then back at me. They're still seeing each other? Yes, I said. The affair never stopped. And it wasn't a fling. It was a plan. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. Then it's time to give them a reality check. We talked for another hour. Compared timelines. Matched lies to locations. Her precision was almost comforting. There was no panic in her, only intent. Purpose. And I realized sitting across from her that I wasn't alone. Not anymore. We weren't just 2 betrayed people trying to make sense of wreckage. We were the people who had walked through fire and now we were ready to light a match of our own. Amanda didn't blink when I told her I wasn't sure what came next. She just looked across her coffee and said, we do this clean. Controlled. Not for drama. For truth. We agreed on a plan within minutes. Melanie and Daniel's art collaboration anniversary was coming up. Amanda had seen the invite on Daniel's shared calendar. Friday, 7 p.m. at a trendy downtown restaurant, the kind with dim lighting and soft jazz where plates cost triple their worth. Apparently, they were celebrating a year since their creative partnership began. Amanda rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might not come back. We'd both received our own forms of gaslighting. I had the video of Melanie calling me too kind to notice. Amanda had screen grabs from Daniel's texts saying she was always tired and emotionally unavailable. They had cast us as villains in their fantasy, silent roadblocks to their self-proclaimed greatness. So we decided they would meet their reality together. We kept it simple. Friday came fast. Amanda and I arrived 10 minutes before the reservation. The hostess looked confused when we gave Daniel's name, but I added, we're joining them. It's a surprise. She smiled, oblivious. We were seated right across from the reserved table, tucked just enough into the shadows. 2 menus, 1 chilled bottle of water between us. I remember Amanda pulling out a slim black folder and laying it on the table like she was about to present at a trial. They arrived right on time. I recognized Melanie's laugh before I saw her. That warm, confident giggle she used to make me feel lucky. Now it just made my skin crawl. She walked in beside Daniel, her hand casually tucked around his arm like she'd never carried anything else. They didn't see us at first. They were too wrapped in themselves or maybe too confident no one was watching. The hostess led them to their table just a few feet from ours. And then it happened. Daniel spotted Amanda first. He blinked, frozen mid-step, like his brain short-circuited. Melanie was still turning her head when she saw me. Her face stopped smiling mid-laugh. Her jaw clenched. Amanda stood slowly, methodically. I followed. Daniel opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Melanie's voice was the first to break the silence. Logan? What? What are you doing here? I smiled, calm as I'd rehearsed. Just dinner. Thought we'd celebrate too. Daniel looked like he might pass out. Amanda held up her folder, then laid it on their table. This is everything. Every lie, every transaction, every picture. You don't need to say anything, it's all in there. Melanie blinked. Her voice dropped an octave. This is private. No, Melanie, I cut in. That's the thing. It stopped being private the second you involved 2 marriages, an entire office, and a shared bank account. She glanced around, finally noticing the other diners. She lowered her voice. You're making a scene. Not yet, Amanda said evenly. But we can. Daniel had dropped into his seat, rubbing his temple like he might wake up from this. Melanie reached for the folder, but Amanda put her hand on it. Not for you. For the lawyers. There was a pause. A thick, bitter silence. And then Amanda said the line I'll remember for the rest of my life. From now on, you live in the world you made. No more fantasy. We didn't shout. We didn't throw drinks. We just stood there, two people who had been deceived, watching the architects of their betrayal squirm in a mess of their own design. After that, Amanda and I turned and walked out. Melanie called after me once. Logan, wait. I didn't. We stepped out into the cool evening air, the city humming around us like it hadn't just witnessed a quiet war. We walked side by side for half a block in silence. Then Amanda said, you know, I don't feel better. But I feel less small. I nodded. Same. We went our separate ways at the corner. No long goodbye, no dramatic hug. Just two people who had done what needed to be done. When I got home, my phone had 5 missed calls from Melanie. I didn't answer. She left one voicemail. Her voice was uneven, frantic. I didn't mean for you to find out like that. Can we talk? Please? I deleted it. The next morning, she showed up at the house. I didn't let her in. She stood on the porch for a few minutes, trying to act composed. She knocked. I stayed still. She finally slipped a note under the door, one I didn't read until days later. It said, I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that. But you also didn't see me anymore. I laughed when I read it. Not because it was funny, but because it was exactly the kind of half-truth she told herself to feel righteous. The truth was I had seen her. I just hadn't seen the version of her she'd become. She came home unannounced 2 days after the restaurant. Not to talk, not at first, just to pack. She moved quietly, grabbing clothes, toiletries, sketch pads. She didn't ask if she could. She just did. Like the space was no longer ours. Like she already knew. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching her. You're being dramatic, she muttered without turning around. I didn't respond. She zipped the suitcase halfway before speaking again. Daniel ended things, she said, voice low. To save his family. His wife gave him an ultimatum. Good, I said. Her hand paused on a sweater. So I'm alone now. If that matters. I shrugged. It doesn't. She turned, and for the first time in weeks, I saw something like fear in her expression. Logan, I made a mistake. A huge one. I thought I was chasing something meaningful, but it was God, it was just ego. You didn't make a mistake, I said. You made a series of choices. Every day. You just didn't think you'd get caught. She didn't deny it. Can we at least talk about dividing things fairly? I handed her an envelope. The documents. The emails. The financial records. This is going to be a one-sided divorce. You're not walking away with anything that isn't yours. Her face fell. And the studio? She asked. I raised an eyebrow. You use company money to fund an affair. You're lucky the only thing you're losing is credibility. She tried one last time, not with logic, but charm. She softened her voice, stepped closer, touched my arm like she used to when she wanted to disarm me. Logan, you know me. Deep down, you know who I am. I looked down at the ring I'd taken off days ago, now resting on the hallway shelf. No, I said, stepping back. I thought I did. But the woman I married wouldn't have looked at me like I was disposable. She stood there, still, quiet, no mask left to wear. Then she left. No dramatic exit. Just the sound of a suitcase rolling across the hardwood floor. The divorce went through faster than I expected. Melanie tried to fight parts of it, half-hearted resistance through a lawyer who backed off after I sent over the evidence archive. Her gallery dropped her quietly. A few clients followed, citing ethical conflicts. And Megan, her assistant, went public about Melanie using studio resources for personal use. The cracks became a landslide. I stayed quiet. No press statements. No retaliatory posts. Just silence. Instead, I turned to my work. The university had greenlit a new concept for campus expansion, and I dove into it like it was air after drowning. I redesigned lecture spaces. Drafted collaborative zones. Slept on my office couch. People said I looked focused. What they didn't know was that focus was survival. 6 months passed. One day, I bumped into Amanda again, not by coincidence, but at a contract review meeting. Her firm had taken on the legal side of our university expansion. She was sharper than ever, calm in a way I hadn't seen before. After the meeting, we grabbed coffee. We didn't talk about Melanie or Daniel until the very end. You know, Amanda said, sipping her drink, I got an invitation to their wedding. 2 months from now. Apparently, the romance survived. I blinked. Me too. Straight into the trash. She smiled. Figures. And for the first time in over a year, I smiled back, not out of bitterness, but peace. I didn't think about Melanie anymore. Not the lies. Not the betrayals. Just the silence she left behind and how for once it felt like clarity. I wasn't rebuilding a life around her absence. I was building something new. And this time, the foundation would be honest. Always.